An 89-year-old suspected gunman has been arrested after opening fire at a social security office and a courthouse in central Athens.
The European Parliament approved a resolution calling for an EU-wide definition of rape based on the absence of freely given and informed consent.
Iran offered to reopen the Strait of Hormuz if the U.S. lifts its naval blockade and brings an end to the war. It is unclear whether Washington will accept the proposal.
An 89-year-old suspected gunman has been arrested after opening fire at a social security office and a courthouse in central Athens on Tuesday, wounding several people. Police said a suspect armed with a shotgun initially opened fire at the National Social Security Fund office in the center of the Greek capital, wounding an employee. Police officers who arrived at the scene treated the man, but the gunman fled the scene. The same man was suspected of later opening fire on the ground floor of the Court of Appeals building in another part of Athens. Several people were also wounded there, police said, adding that authorities had found the shotgun. He was located hours later in a hotel in Patras, 215 kilometers south of Athens. The motive for the shooting was unclear. State broadcaster ERT said the gunman had reportedly thrown envelopes with documents onto the floor after the shooting at the courthouse, saying those were the reasons for his actions.
The European Parliament on Tuesday approved a resolution calling for an EU-wide definition of rape based on the absence of freely given and informed consent. The resolution urges that only a clear, affirmative, freely given and unambiguous indication of consent is valid in sexual relations. It adds that silence, a lack of verbal or physical resistance, or the absence of a no cannot be interpreted as consent. Any sexual act outside this framework should be considered rape. Lack of consent is already a defining element of rape or sexual assault in 17 EU member states, according to the European Parliament Research Service. However, legislation in several member states still relies on a force-based definition of rape, requiring victims to prove violence or threats. Supporters of the resolution argue that recent cases have exposed the limits of force-based definitions. Speaking to Euronews, Abir al-Salani pointed to cases in France involving drugging and online abuse as evidence of evolving forms of sexual violence.
It comes because of all these scandals that have been surrounding this topic, from the case of Madame Pilico in France to the so-called rape academy, where you drug women, where the partners drug women, they rape them and they streamed it online. So the violence has evolved against women. Sexual violence in Europe has evolved.
It is now up to the European Commission to propose legislation, which would then need to be approved by EU member states.
French President and co-Prince of Andorra, Emmanuel Macron, has called for the debate on decriminalizing abortion to move forward in Andorra during his visit of the microstates. Alongside the Vatican, the Principality of Andorra is the only European country to completely ban abortion, even in case of rape, incest, danger to the mother, or fetal abnormality.
Votre gouvernement a fait une proposition d'avancée. Elle me paraît proportionnée. Et avançant sur la dépénalisation pour les femmes, elle va sur ce chemin. De là où je suis, sans préempter vos débats à venir, je souhaite avec affection que ce débat progresse.
Women in Andorra face up to 6 months in prison for having abortion. Doctors who perform them face up to 3 years in prison and a 5-year ban on practicing. In March, the head of the Andorran government, Xavier Espot Zamora, said he was hoping he could decriminalize abortion within a year, yet without legalizing it.
Iran offered to reopen the Strait of Hormuz if the U.S. lifts its naval blockade and brings an end to the war. It is unclear whether Washington will accept the proposal, which would postpone discussions on Tehran's nuclear program.
Iran has proposed a mutual reopening of the strait, leaving the nuclear discussion for later in the process. Given that the nuclear program has been a red line for this administration, Would the president agree to that kind of phased negotiation?
What I will reiterate is that the president's red lines with respect to Iran have been made very, very clear, not just to the American public, but also to them as well.
So they're considering that phased approach?
I wouldn't say they're considering it. I would just say that there was a discussion this morning that I don't want to get ahead of, and you'll hear directly from the president, I'm sure, on this topic very soon.
Despite a fragile but ongoing ceasefire, the standoff between the US and Iran persists on the Strait of Hormuz. The US imposed its own blockade on the waterway earlier this month, resulting in a dual blockade. Washington says it is designed to prevent Iran from selling its oil and deprive it from crucial revenue. Meanwhile, Iran says the responsibility for the disruption of the waterway lies with the US.
Responsibility for any disruption to maritime transport lies with the aggressors, the United States and its supporters.
The latest development emerged after Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi visited Russia following the cancellation of potential ceasefire talks between US and Iran in Pakistan. In Gaza, a severe shortage of spare parts has paralyzed the transport sector. As part of the ceasefire terms, at least 600 aid trucks a day should be permitted to enter Gaza. However, many organizations warn the amount of aid entering the strip are still inadequate. Amid the limited flow of goods into Gaza, spare auto parts have been among the lowest priority items.
والله الوضع الحالي سيء جدا جدا. هاي الوضع الحالي الباصات قاعدة، السيارات كمان قاعدة، لا في كاوشوك عنا ولا في بطاريات ولا في زيوت، الزيت ب1000 شيكل وزيادة، البطارية ب20,000 شيكل و15,000 شيكل و10,000 المستخدمة، الكاوشوك ب20,000 شيكل الفردة، يعني صراحة الوضع صعب.
On the ground, the impact is clear. Cars remain parked, buses are out of service, and basic repairs are no longer affordable. Prices have skyrocketed, and repairs that once took hours now take days.
بعد 7 أكتوبر فيش قطع غيار، احنا بنستبدل الحاجات قديمة وبنحاول انه زي ما بنقول ان الرملة من الشيء انها تمشي مع الزبون. يعني كانت تكلفة الأوفرهول لأي سيارة بدنا نعملها كانت تكلفتها حوالي 2000-2500 شيكل. اليوم تطلع فوق ال 17,000 شيكل، الشغله الوحيده اللي مش متوفره اللي هو الزيت، سعر لتر الزيت اليوم يتراوح فوق ال 1000 شيكل ان وجد، والقديم فوق ال 300 شيكل حاليا، فاغلب السواقين كلهم بتعاني من هذه القصه لانه ما فيش زيوت والمواتير بتقف.
The shortage of spare parts is not only impacting civilians and owners of commercial vehicles, but also emergency response teams. Economists warn that if the situation persists, it could result in near total paralysis of the transport and services sector, restricting people's access to hospitals, essential services, and places of work.
Europe's first complete lithium mine begins operating in Sivajärvi in western Finland. The strategic resource is critical for manufacturing modern electronics. At a cost of around €783 million, Project Keliber was mainly funded by South African mining giant Sibanye-Stillwater and the European Union. Hanu Hotala, CEO of Keliber, explains the full production chain to produce battery-quality lithium.
We are now extracting spodumene ore. It contains some 1 to 1.3% lithium oxide. Then we transport it to the concentrator, and there the lithium oxide content is increased to 5%. And further to lithium refinery, and there the lithium concentrate is produced as a battery quality lithium hydroxide.
Meanwhile, locals from a nearby town say they have mixed feelings about the mine, as they recognise it is good for employment but worry about the environmental impact. The Keliber project covers more than 500 square kilometres and 6 other mining sites are planned in the area. Some compare the role of lithium nowadays to the role that oil played at the start of the 20th century.
Today we are joined by Natalia Szelewicz, an art historian who studied in London and a curator at the Museum of Modern Art in Warsaw. We are currently sitting in one of the museum's galleries in Warsaw, where you can admire the latest exhibition she has curated, but she's also working with, among others, an Estonian artist on this year's Venice Biennale.
Jaka jest rola sztuki w świecie pełnym konfliktów?
Wydaje mi się, że teraz jesteśmy u schyłku też takiego zjawiska, które obserwowaliśmy w ostatnich 10 latach, które po pierwsze dało poprzez przestrzeń social mediów dało trochę taką iluzję udemokratycznienia dostępu zarówno do sztuki, jak i komentowania rzeczywistości w sposób polityczny, gdzie bardzo głośno argumentowaliśmy, mówiliśmy, jak wygląda świat, co jest słuszne, co nie. To było oczywiście bardzo potrzebne, ale też zmieniła się rola instytucji, które być może w perspektywie wielu osób pouczały trochę z góry, zabierały taki głos ekspercki i ja bym bardzo broniła jakby tego eksperckiego głosu instytucji, ale bez elitaryzmu. Jeżeli chodzi o rolę sztuki, instytucji, to wydaje mi się, że to jest poszukiwanie nowych języków, które z jednej strony jasno nazywają pewne, nie wiem, uniwersalne prawdy czy konflikty, przemoc, a z drugiej strony nie sytuowałyby się w roli, która dawałaby pozory jakiejś takiej nieskazitelnej niewinności, ponieważ wszyscy jako jednostki, instytucje, organizacje jesteśmy częścią tego bardzo złożonego i coraz bardziej skomplikowanego świata.